For over 20 years, my wife, Martha, went to the bank every Thursday without fail, like clockwork. I never asked her why. I trusted her with my life, and with every single dollar I earned, pouring concrete and welding steel, raising bridges and highways across this state. I figured she was saving for our future, or maybe helping out a charity. I was naive. When she died last week, I discovered the truth, and I felt the blood run cold in my veins. The woman I had slept beside for nearly all my adult life had a double life, recorded in a small blue notebook. And that secret was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. My name is Thomas Gresham, and I'm 80 years old. I spent my life pouring concrete and welding steel. I can spot a crack in a foundation before the whole house comes down. But that rainy afternoon at Oak Hill Memorial Gardens, I didn't see the biggest crack of all. The water was sheeting down, turning the red clay of Georgia into a slippery mudslide around the fresh grave. I stood there, staring at the mahogany casket that held my Marty. I wanted to cry. I wanted to drop to my knees and scream up at the gray sky, but I couldn't. I was numb, like every circuit in my body had shorted out. I just stood still, a statue, gripping the handle of my black umbrella so hard my knuckles went white. Beside me was my son, Darnell. He's 62 and works a middle management job at a logistics company downtown. That morning, he was putting on quite a show. He was weeping loudly, his shoulders shaking, and he kept blotting his eyes with a silk handkerchief. To anyone watching, he was the perfect image of a son ravaged by grief. But I've spent my life building things. I look for the details, the stress points, and I saw something that didn't fit. Every time Darnell lifted the handkerchief to his face, his left hand would subtly adjust his shirt cuff. He'd pull the sleeve of his black suit jacket just enough to expose his wrist. That's when I saw the flash of gold. It wasn't just any watch. It was a solid gold Rolex Submariner. I know what things cost. That watch easily runs $30,000. I just stared at it, watching the rain bead and slide off the golden links. Darnell makes maybe $60,000 a year. He has a mortgage he complains about constantly. He has 2 kids in private school that I help pay for myself. He drives a leased sedan. Where the heck had he gotten $30,000 for a watch? I hadn't bought it for him. And Marty, as far as I knew, didn't have that kind of cash. Or so I thought. He must have noticed me looking. For a fraction of a second, the sorrow vanished from his face. His eyes went hard and cold, like a shark's. He yanked his sleeve down fast, covering the gold, and immediately returned to his dramatic weeping. A cold feeling started in my stomach. And it wasn't the damp air. It was my instinct telling me that my family's foundation was rotten. We drove back to the house for the repast. I built this house with my own hands 30 years ago. Solid oak floors, a fieldstone fireplace. It was supposed to be our refuge. Now, it was full of people eating potato salad and whispering empty condolences. I sat in my usual armchair in the corner, just observing. My daughter, Lorraine, was in the kitchen doing the real work, making coffee, serving food, making sure everyone was looked after. She looked exhausted. Darnell, on the other hand, was lurking. I watched him pace the living room, looking at the paintings on the walls, the furniture, the trinkets, like an appraiser sizing up a house for auction. When the last guest finally left, Darnell didn't come over to ask how I felt. He didn't put a hand on my shoulder. He walked straight over to me and sat on the ottoman across from my chair. "Dad, we need to discuss logistics," he said. his voice too smooth, too polished. I looked at him, tired. Can we not do this today, Darnell? We just buried your mother. We have to take care of the administrative side, Dad, he insisted. Look, I know you're grieving and not thinking straight. I need the key to Mom's home office. What for? I asked, my voice rough. I have to look for insurance policies, Darnell said, leaning toward me. You know how expensive funerals are, Dad, and the hospital bills for the chemo must be through the roof. I want to help you review the debts so we can pay the funeral home. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my child. I saw a stranger, a greedy stranger. I sat up a little straighter. The father left, and the engineer came out. The man who had dealt with crooked inspectors and sloppy subcontractors. The funeral's taken care of, Darnell, I said, ice cold. I signed the check yesterday. It's paid. Darnell blinked in surprise. Oh, well, that's good. But the medical bills, Dad, the hospitalization was long. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe we'll have to liquidate some assets or review her accounts to cover it. I let out a dry, harsh laugh. Liquidate assets. Is that what you call it? Listen to me, Darnell, I said, locking eyes with him. Last week, I paid the hospital bill. $512,000. I paid it from my savings. I don't have debts. I haven't had debts since 1985. Your mother's medical care was paid by me, not by insurance, so you don't need to look for anything. Darnell's face went pale. He hadn't known I had that much liquid cash. He thought I was just a retired old man living on a Social Security check. He didn't know about the investments I'd made back in the 90s. But Dad, he stammered, trying to compose himself, there might be other things. Mom could have personal debts, or maybe she left a will in there. I just want to help you organize everything. You're wearing a $30,000 watch, Darnell, I said, pointing at his wrist. He flinched and quickly covered it with his other hand. It's fake, Dad. A knockoff. I bought it online for $50 just to look professional at work. I looked at him. I know gold. I know its weight, the way it catches the light. That was no imitation. But I didn't press the point. Not yet. Go home, Darnell, I said. Go back to your wife. Leave the organizing to me. He hesitated for a moment. He glanced towards the door of Marty's office at the end of the hall. I saw the hunger in his eyes. He didn't want to help. He wanted to find something. All right, Dad, he said, getting to his feet. I was just trying to be a good son. Call me if you need anything. He left quickly. Lorraine kissed me on the forehead and left shortly after, asking me to call if I needed company. Finally, I was alone. The house was silent, too silent. The silence buzzed in my ears. I sat there for a long time, until night fell, and shadows filled the rooms. I couldn't stop thinking about Darnell's desperation to get into that office. Marty was private. She always kept the household accounts and managed a small checking account for groceries and the hairdresser. Why would Darnell think there was anything of value in there unless he knew something I didn't? I got up, my knees protesting, and walked down the hall to the small room Marty used as an office. It was locked. It always was, she said, because she didn't want the grandkids messing up her sewing patterns. I didn't have the key. Darnell had asked me for it, which meant he didn't have it either. But I didn't need it. I had built that door frame. I went to the garage and grabbed a thin piece of high-tensile wire. It took me 10 seconds to force that simple lock. I stepped inside. The room smelled of her lavender and old paper. My heart broke all over again. Her sewing machine was covered in one corner. The desk was neat and impeccable. I started checking the drawers. Nothing out of the ordinary. Utility bills, Christmas card lists, coupons clipped from the Sunday paper. Marty was frugal. She'd drive an extra 2 miles just to save 10 cents on a gallon of milk. That's why the idea of her having secret debts seemed ridiculous. I checked the filing cabinet. Nothing. Tax returns, house deeds. I sat in her chair, feeling foolish. Maybe Darnell was just being nosy. Maybe I was just a paranoid old man, looking for a fight to distract myself from grief. I took one last look around the room. My eyes fell on her old sewing basket on the shelf. It was a wicker basket she'd been using for 40 years. Darnell would never look in there. To him, it was just grandma's stuff. But I knew Marty hid her chocolates in there, away from the grandkids. I reached up, took the basket down, and opened the lid. There were spools of thread, needles, a pincushion, and underneath a layer of fabric scraps, something hard and rectangular. I pulled it out. It was an accounts ledger, a hardback blue notebook, the kind you buy at a stationery store. It looked old. The spine was cracked and faded. I opened it to the first page. At the top was a date, January 14th, 1984. The handwriting was Marty's neat cursive. Thursday, First Colonial Bank. Withdrawal, $1,000. I frowned. In 1984, that was serious money. It was more than I earned in 2 weeks back then. I turned the page. January 21st, 1984. Thursday, First Colonial Bank. Withdrawal, $1,000. I kept turning. Every week, every Thursday, for decades. I did the math in my head. 52 weeks a year, multiplied by 40 years. Over $2 million. My hands started to shake. I dropped the notebook onto the desk. Where had she gotten that money? Marty had been a school teacher until she retired. She didn't have millions, and even if she had, why withdraw it in cash every week? I remembered something. Every Thursday, for as long as I could remember, Marty would go out to run errands. She'd say she was going to the market, and then to the bank to deposit her pension or move money into the savings account. I never checked anything. I never asked for receipts. I trusted her. But according to that notebook, she wasn't depositing. She was withdrawing $1,000 a week for 40 years. Where was that money going? I turned to the last entry. It was dated the previous Thursday, 3 days before she died. That week, she was so weak she could barely walk. I had driven her to the grocery store and waited while she went into the bank next door. She insisted on going in alone. The entry was shaky, written with a hand already losing strength, but it was there. Thursday, First Colonial Bank, $1,000. And next to it, for the first time in 40 years, there was a note. A single word, written in red ink. Done. I stared at that word. Done. What was done? Then I remembered the watch, the gold Rolex on Darnell's wrist, the way he hid it, his urgency to get into this office. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was scared. The next morning, I drove to the First Colonial Bank. It was Thursday, just like the ledger marked. The sun was shining, but the air cut right through my canvas jacket. I sat in the truck for a moment, watching the automatic doors slide open and shut. For decades, Marty had walked through those doors every Thursday. I tried to picture her walking in there. Was she nervous, looking over her shoulder? Or did she walk in with her head held high, like she did with everything? I realized with a sudden, painful clarity that I didn't know. I didn't know the woman who came to this bank. I looked down at my own clothes, my usual worn work pants, still stained with hydraulic oil from the tractor, and old but comfortable boots. I own suits and have plenty of money for expensive clothes, but I'm a builder. I'm comfortable in the clothes I built my life in. I didn't think about it until I walked into the lobby. The bank had changed since I built this branch back in '98. They had remodeled. Now it was all polished glass and steel, cold and personal. I walked up to the teller line. A young woman was behind the counter. Her name tag read Jessica. She looked about 20 with perfect nails and a bored expression. When it was my turn, she looked me up and down. Her eyes paused on the worn collar of my jacket and the dirt under my nails. I saw the instant judgment. To her, I was an old guy coming in to cash a small Social Security check or complain about a $5 fee. "How can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. "The one you use with children or someone you want to rush out the door?" "I need to see the account activity for my wife's account," I said. My voice came out rougher than I wanted. I cleared my throat. Her name was Martha Gresham. She passed away last week. The girl didn't even type anything. She just gave me a tight, textbook smile. "I'm sorry for your loss, sir, but I can't give out account information to anyone but the account holder. It's a privacy policy." I took a deep breath. "I know the policy, miss, but I'm her husband. I'm the executor of her estate. I have my ID." I started to pull out my wallet, but she stopped me with a hand up. "Sir, unless your name is on the account or you have a court order right here, I can't help you. You'll have to make an appointment with an executive next week." "Next week?" I repeated. The blue notebook was burning a hole in my pocket. "I can't wait until next week. I don't want to withdraw anything. I just need to see the history." She came here every Thursday for decades. Does anyone here know her? Jessica sighed heavily. "Sir, please lower your voice, or I'll have to call security. We have hundreds of customers. We don't keep track of who comes in on Thursdays. If you're not conducting a transaction, I have to ask you to step aside for the other customers." I felt the blood rush to my face. It wasn't embarrassment. It was rage. I looked around the lobby, up at the ceiling, at the great vault door at the back. I pointed up with a calloused finger. "See those trusses, miss? Those steel beams holding up the ceiling? I welded them. And that vault back there, that reinforced concrete box? I poured that myself. I built this building when you were still in diapers. So don't you tell me to step aside. Call your manager. Call Ms. Henderson." Now, the girl's eyes widened. She was about to retort, but something in my face stopped her. She pressed a button under the counter and disappeared into the back offices. A moment later, a door opened, and the manager walked out. Ms. Henderson was a woman in her 60s, sharp and elegant. We'd known each other for 20 years. She looked at the teller, then at me. Her face softened instantly. "Mr. Gresham," she said, walking toward me with her hand extended. "I heard about Martha. I'm truly sorry." She ignored my work clothes and gave my hand a firm shake. "Thank you, Miss Henderson," I replied. "I need your help. Your teller here says I need a court order to find out what my wife was doing here for decades." The manager looked at young Jessica, who shrank against the wall. "It's all right, Jessica. Mr. Gresham is a historic client. I'll take care of this." She led me to her office. It was silent inside. The walls were covered with diplomas and family photos. She gestured to a leather armchair, closed the door, and sat on the other side of the desk. She looked tired, with a hesitation in her movements that I didn't remember. "Thomas,"
she said, using my first name. "I figured you'd end up coming in. I saw the obituary in the paper. Martha was a wonderful woman." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "She was, Miss Henderson. I found a book, a ledger. Marty kept a record. She came here every week, every Thursday. The notebook says she was depositing or moving $1,000 each time." The manager's face became inscrutable. She adjusted her glasses. "I need to know how much is in that account," I said. "I need to know why she was saving it. Was it for the grandkids? For a charity? Darnell thinks she had debts, but I know that's not true." Ms. Henderson sighed, turned to her computer, and typed for a few seconds. The click-clack of the keys was the only sound in the office. "Thomas," she finally said in a low voice, "Martha didn't have a joint account with you here. It was a personal account, an investment fund she opened in 1984. 1984, the year the notebook started." "Good," I said, leaning forward. "So what's the balance?" The manager hesitated. She looked at the screen and then back at me with eyes full of pity. "I hate pity. Mr. Gresham, the account balance is $1,450. I froze. I felt the floor disappear under my chair. $1,450? I repeated. "That's impossible. The notebook lists thousands of entries. 1,000 a week for decades. That's millions, Miss Henderson." "Where is the money?" She turned the monitor so I could see. I squinted at the columns of numbers. "You're reading it backward, Thomas," she said softly. "Martha wasn't depositing money." "She wasn't?" I asked, confused. "She was withdrawing it," she explained gently. "Every Thursday, an automatic transfer came in from her teacher's pension and a small annuity she inherited from her parents years ago. And every Thursday, she came to the window and took out $1,000 in cash." The room started spinning. "Withdrawing," I stammered. "And where did she take it? If she didn't leave it here, where did it go?" "We always assumed she gave it to you," the manager said, "or used it for household expenses. She always asked for large denominations, $100 bills. She would put the envelope in her purse and leave. She never missed a Thursday." I leaned back in the chair, as if I'd been hit. She wasn't saving, she was bleeding. For 40 years, my wife had been draining her pension and her inheritance, taking out cash and making it disappear. And she wasn't giving it to me. I paid for the house. I paid for the cars. I paid for the food. I paid for everything. Her money was, theoretically, her indulgence, her security. "Wait," I said, my mind racing a mile a minute. "Last week, the Thursday before she died, and she was very ill. Ms. Henderson. She could barely stand. I drove her here. I saw her go in." "Yes, she came." The manager nodded sadly. "She looked terrible, Thomas. I offered to help her, but she refused. She went to the window, withdrew the last $1,000 she had for that month. Her hands were shaking so much, she dropped the envelope twice." "Why?" I whispered. "Why would she do that? She was dying. She knew it. Why did she need $1,000 in cash 3 days before she died?" The manager took off her glasses. "I don't know, Thomas. But there's something else. That last day, she didn't put the envelope in her purse." "What did she do with it?" I asked. "She went out the back door," she explained, "towards the employee parking lot. It's more private. We don't usually let customers exit that way, but we made an exception for Martha because she had trouble walking." I thanked Ms. Henderson. I got up on legs like jelly and walked out of the office, crossing the lobby without seeing anyone. My head was a hurricane. Marty wasn't accumulating a fortune. She was paying someone $1,000 a week, $52,000 a year, over $2 million over the course of our marriage. She had spent 40 years handing over cash, and she made sure to make the very last payment, even while agonizing. Who had that power over my wife?
Who could make a dying woman crawl to the bank to deliver an envelope? I went out to the truck. The rain had started again. I sat behind the wheel and stared straight ahead. I thought about the blue notebook. I thought about the word in red ink. Done. Whatever the debt was, whatever the blackmail, it ended with her death. Or maybe she had just paid it off in time. I felt a cold rage growing inside me. It displaced the grief and the confusion. Someone had done this to her. Someone had squeezed her dry. I started the engine. I wasn't going home. I was going to find out who was waiting for her in that back parking lot. And God help them when I did. I drove back with the blue notebook on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. The rain had turned into a steady drizzle that matched the gray inside the cab. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was flying. I kept seeing that word in red. Done. I saw the balance. $1,450. I saw the gold flash on my son's wrist. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait. I parked in front of the house, which now seemed too large and too empty without Marty. I went straight to the kitchen and picked up the landline. I called Lorraine first. She answered on the second ring, her voice laden with the same grief I felt. I told her to come over for dinner. Then I called Darnell. He sounded suspicious. He asked if I'd found the insurance policies yet. I told him to come over, that I'd bought a bucket of fried chicken, and didn't want to eat alone. It was a lie, but I knew he'd come. He was sniffing around the money like a bloodhound, and wouldn't miss a chance to get back into the house. An hour later, we were sitting around the oak dining table. I didn't take out the good china. We were eating on disposable plates, just my 2 children and me. The only sounds were the rain against the window and the scrape of plastic forks. Lorraine looked tired, picking at the coleslaw, her eyes red. The emptiness of her mother was visible on her slumped shoulders. Darnell was different. He ate fast, nervously. His eyes darted from shelf to shelf, from cabinet to cabinet, towards the hall that led to the office. He was wearing a casual polo shirt that night, but I could still see the watch on his wrist. His left hand remained under the table most of the time. "So, Dad," Darnell said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Did you get into the office? Find anything important?" I stopped chewing. I looked at him. He was 62, but at that moment, he looked like a teenager caught hiding a bad report card. I put my fork down next to the plate. I reached into the pocket of my flannel shirt and pulled out the blue notebook. I didn't say anything. I just let it drop onto the middle of the table. It hit the wood between the mashed potatoes and the biscuits. The effect was immediate. Darnell froze. His fork clattered onto his plate. His face turned flour white. He stared at the blue cover as if it were a venomous snake. He knew exactly what it was. I saw it in his eyes. "What is that?" Lorraine asked, confused. She reached out to touch it, but I stopped her gently. "Ask your brother," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "He seems to recognize it." Darnell swallowed hard. "No, I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. It looks like any old notebook." "Don't lie to me, boy," I thundered. My voice cut the air like a whip. "I went to the bank today, Darnell. I spoke to Miss Henderson. I know about the withdrawals. Every Thursday, $1,000 for decades. Over $2 million. "Where is it?" Lorraine covered her mouth. $2 million? Dad, what are you saying? Mom didn't have that kind of money. Yes, she did, I replied, not taking my eyes off my son. She had her pension. She had an inheritance I never touched, and she drained it to the last penny. And I think Darnell knows exactly where that money went. He pushed his chair back with a screeching sound on the floor. He looked trapped, his forehead sweating. All right, look, Dad, he stammered, raising his hands. I didn't want you to know. Mom made me promise. She begged me not to tell you. It was her secret. What secret? I roared. She had a problem, Dad, Darnell said, lowering his voice. An illness. She was addicted to gambling. Online poker, slot machines. It started in the 80s, and she never could stop. She lost everything. I tried to help her, I tried to control it, but it was uncontrollable. She was sick. I fell silent. Lorraine looked at him as if he were crazy. Gambling? She repeated. Are you hearing yourself? Mom didn't even know how to use a smartphone. Remember last Christmas? I tried to teach her to video chat, and she thought the government was recording her through the camera. She was still using a flip phone. From 2005. You want me to believe she'd been playing online poker for 40 years, since the 80s? When the internet barely existed? Darnell flushed. It wasn't just online, Lorraine. There were clandestine games, too. Local stuff. She had a problem, okay? You guys didn't know her like I did. She confessed to me. I leaned back in the chair, looking at my hands, hardened by 50 years of labor. I remembered Marty sitting at that very table, clipping coupons from the newspaper. I remembered watching her walk 2 miles to the store because she said gas was too expensive for such a short trip. I remembered how she mended my socks because she refused to buy new ones until the old ones were full of holes. Marty didn't gamble. She didn't buy lottery tickets. She wouldn't even go to the parish bingo because she said it was a waste of time. My son was lying right to my face, and with a flimsy lie at that. But I didn't shout. I didn't cross the table to shake him until his teeth rattled. Bechelt, even though my body urged me to. I had to be smarter. If I cornered him, he'd hire lawyers, hide the money, disappear. I needed to catch him red-handed, so I let my shoulders slump. I molded my face into a mask of a defeated old man. I rubbed my eyes. Gambling, I whispered, as if the word cost me dearly. My Marty, I can't believe it. It's the truth, Dad, Darnell rushed, seizing the opening. She was sick, but it's over now. The money's gone. There's nothing we can do. We just have to move on, protect her memory. I let out a long, shaky sigh. I guess you're right, son. If she spent it, she spent it. I'm just so tired. You should rest, Dad, Darnell said, standing up. He looked relieved, the tension draining from his body. He thought he had won, that I was a congenial old man he could tell anything to. We're leaving. We'll let you sleep. Lorraine looked at me worriedly. Are you sure, Dad? This doesn't make any sense. It's all right, honey, I told her, patting her hand. Your brother's right. We can't change the past. Go home. Kiss those kids for me. I walked them to the door. Darnell practically ran to his car. He didn't look back. Lorraine hugged me tight and promised to come by the next day. I stood in the doorway, watching their taillights disappear down the dark road. I waited until the silence of the night settled back in. Then I straightened up. The weariness vanished. The pain I pushed into a dark corner inside me. I went back to the kitchen and picked up the phone. I didn't dial a financial advisor or the police. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years, but still knew by heart. It rang 4 times until a raspy voice answered. Yeah? Reggie, it's Tom Gresham. There was a pause. I heard the click of a lighter and a deep drag. Tom, heard about Marty. I'm sorry. She was a saint. She was, Reggie, I replied. Look, I need a favor, a big one. And I need it today. I'm retired, Tom. You know that. My knees are shot. I drink too much. I know, I said. But this is family business. And it has to do with the bank branch I built downtown. The First Colonial. The one you rigged up. I heard him blow out the smoke. What do you need? The security tapes, ACR. I said. Specifically, the exterior back camera that points at the employee parking lot every Thursday for the last month, but especially last Thursday. That's a big ask, Tom. Banks don't hand that over easy. I know, I said. But you installed the system 3 years ago as the contractor. You still have the master codes. You bragged about it at the poker game. Reggie let out a dry chuckle. You've got a good memory for your age. What do you want them for? I think someone was robbing my wife, I replied, my voice turning to ice. I think someone was bleeding her dry for 40 years. And I think I know who it is. There was silence. All right, Tom, come to my place in 20 minutes. Bring a good bottle of whiskey. I hung up. I went to the living room cabinet and took out the bottle of single malt I was saving for our 50th anniversary. I wouldn't need it to celebrate anything now. I grabbed my keys and the blue notebook. The role of the grieving widower was over. Tonight, I was going to be the man who built bridges and knocked down obstacles. Darnell thought he could hide behind the word gambling. He thought he could smear his mother's name to cover his own greed. He was about to learn that you don't steal from a man who knows how to pour concrete over a problem. The rain beat on the metal roof of the truck like 1,000 hammers as I drove towards the outskirts. Where the asphalt turns to gravel and streetlights become a luxury, lived Reggie. His house was a converted shipping container behind an old junkyard. To anyone else, it would look like a pile of scrap, but I knew Reggie. Inside that metal box, there was enough computing power to launch a rocket. I took the bottle from the passenger seat and ran to the door. Reggie opened it before I could knock. He was just as thin and wrinkled, but with more gray hair. He wore a stained white undershirt and sweatpants, a cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth. Inside, the place smelled of stale tobacco, ozone, and old coffee. It smelled of secrets. He didn't say anything, just nodded toward the bottle and stepped aside. I walked in. It was a labyrinth of racks, fans, and cables snaking like black serpents. In the center, a desk with 3 huge monitors illuminated the gloom. I sat on a folding metal chair that groaned under my weight. Reggie uncorked the whiskey, took a long swig from the bottle, and passed it to me. I drank. It burned all the way down to my stomach, warming the knot inside. All right, Tom, Reggie said, sitting down at the keyboard. I still have admin access. They never changed the passwords. Laziness is the best friend and worst enemy of security. The screens flickered, code scrolling down like a waterfall. Suddenly, a grainy black and white image appeared. I recognized the angle instantly. The bank's rear camera focusing on the employee parking lot and the loading ramp. Let's go back a month, Reggie said, to see the pattern. He clicked to a Thursday date. I leaned forward. At 10:15, the back door opened. My breath hitched. It was Marty. Even in that blurry image, I recognized her walk. She was wearing her winter coat and her usual purse. She stepped out into the cold, looking nervously from side to side. She didn't walk toward any car. She walked towards the darkest corner of the parking lot, where the shadow of the building next door was thickest. A few moments later, a black sedan entered the scene. It moved slowly, like a shark in shallow water. The windows were so heavily tinted, they looked like ink. There was no front license plate, and the rear one was covered with mud or tape. The car stopped. Marty approached the passenger side window. The glass lowered just a crack. Marty took a thick white envelope from her purse and slid it through the gap. The window went up immediately. The car didn't stay even for half a second. It didn't wait. It didn't accelerate slowly. It spun around and drove out of the frame. My hands clenched my knees until the arthritis protested. She was left alone, small, in the middle of the exhaust fumes. "Show me the next week," I requested. Reggie advanced 7 days. Same time, same ritual. Marty exits. The sedan appears. She hands over the envelope. The car drives away. There was no conversation, no hug, no greeting. It wasn't a relative helping out. It was an extortion. "Go to last Thursday," I whispered, "the one before she died." Reggie hesitated. "You sure you want to see it? You said she was ill." "I need to see it, Reggie. I need to know who did this to her." He clicked. The time stamp showed the previous Thursday, a clear but windy day. The back door opened slowly. It took time to open. Then Marty appeared. I let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. She looked terrible. She wore a scarf on her head, concealing the hair loss from the chemo. The coat hung on her like it was 2 sizes too big. She stumbled as she crossed the threshold and had to steady herself against the brick wall. She stood there, panting, gathering her strength. She shouldn't have been out of bed. She should have been under a blanket with my hand in hers. But she was in a cold parking lot, paying a debt that wasn't hers. The black sedan appeared again, the same car. It stopped aggressively, inches from her. Marty pushed herself off the wall, her legs trembling. You could see it even on the screen. She reached into her purse, moving with visible pain. She pulled out the envelope, approached the car, and tapped the glass, maybe asking for help, maybe just for a human gesture. The window lowered halfway. Marty extended the envelope, but her hand was shaking so badly that she dropped it. The white envelope fell to the wet pavement. She bent down to pick it up. Watching her bend over was torture. She was so frail. I thought she would break. Finally, she picked it up and straightened. She offered it again, and then I saw it. A hand shot out of the car. It didn't reach out to gently take the money. It snatched it, grabbing the envelope and a piece of Marty's sleeve, pulling her forward. She lost her balance, hit her shoulder guard against the side mirror, and fell to her knees on the asphalt. The hand didn't come out again. The door didn't open. The driver didn't lean over to see if she was all right. The window rolled up, and the car sped away, splashing dirty water on my agonizing wife. Marty remained on her knees for a long time. Then slowly, using the wall, she got back on her feet, dusted off her coat, and limped back towards the main bank entrance, where I was waiting in the car, completely oblivious. I was trembling, but not from the cold. It was a white, pure rage, like molten lead in my veins. I wanted to kill the driver. I wanted to tear that car to pieces. "Stop the image," I ordered. "Go back. When the hand comes out, freeze it there." Reggie hit a key. The image froze, with the blurry hand in motion. "Clean it up," I said. "Focus. I need to see that arm." Reggie began adjusting filters, contrast, light, and sharpness. The image gradually cleared. It was a man's arm with a dark sleeve, maybe a polo shirt or a sweater. But what caught my eye was the wrist. There was a metallic gleam. "Zoom in," I asked. The pixels grew, and the diffuse shape became sharp. It was a watch.
A large gold watch. I knew that watch. I knew every link, every curve. I had watched it in the rain at the cemetery. A gold Rolex Submariner. I looked at the hand again. On the ring finger, a gold signet ring with a black stone was shining. A heavy onyx ring. I gave that ring to Darnell when he graduated from college. It had been my father's. There were no more doubts. There was no room for denial or a father's hope. The man in the car, the man who watched his mother fall to her knees and drove away, the man who had been bleeding her dry for years. It was my son, Darnell, my own flesh and blood. Reggie saw the recognition on my face. He saw the devastation. He filled a grungy glass with a generous pour of whiskey and handed it to me. "You know him, don't you, Tom?" he asked in a low voice. I took the glass. My hand was no longer shaking. The shock had given way to the resolve of a man who has work to do. "Yes," I said. "I know him. Can you print that?" I pointed to the screen. A high-resolution copy of that wrist and that watch. "Done," Reggie said. He printed the image. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket next to the blue notebook. I got up, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, but also a new strength. "Thanks, Reggie. I owe you one." "You don't owe me nothing," he grumbled, looking at the screen with disgust. "Just whatever you're going to do, make it hurt." "It's going to hurt," I said, more than anything in his life. I walked it out into the cold night. The rain had stopped, but the air was biting. I got back into the truck and started the engine. I wasn't going to confront Darnell yet. He would deny everything. He'd say he loaned the car, that the watch was stolen. He'd invent another story, like the gambling lie. No, first I needed to know why. The notebook started in 1984. Darnell was just 22 then, newly working on my construction sites. What happened that year? Why did the payments start then? I drove back home, digging through the layers of 40 years of memories. I went straight to the basement. That's where I kept the old files for Gresham Construction. Boxes of invoices, tax returns, and contracts. I keep everything. I turned on the bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The basement smelled of dust, dry earth, and old paper. I found the box marked 1984 to 1985. I carried it over to my workbench and cut the tape with my pocket knife. Inside were invoices, timesheets, and safety reports. I flipped through the months: April, May, June. Then I saw the folder I was looking for. The tab was red. Incident Report, June 14th, 1984. I didn't need to read it to remember. I'd relived that date in nightmares for years. We were building the I-20 overpass. It was the biggest contract I'd ever won, a job that should have put us on the map. Instead, it nearly sank us. I remember the sound first, the screech of tearing metal, then the screaming, then the dull thud of the scaffolding collapsing. A young man named Marcus was up there. He fell 30 feet. He survived but never walked again. The investigation was brutal. Safety inspectors swarmed us. They found that a safety bolt was missing from the main mechanism. They talked about negligence. Insurance premiums skyrocketed. I lost 3 contracts. We were on the verge of bankruptcy. I spent 5 years working 18 hours a day just to keep the lights on. I always wondered how that bolt came out. Those bolts are steel. They don't just fall off. I closed the folder. That was the official version.
But if the notebook started in 1984, there had to be something more. I looked around the rest of the basement. In a corner under a tarp, there was a cedar chest that Marty had brought from her mother's house. She kept things too valuable to throw away and too painful to look at in there. Baby clothes, photos of relatives who died young. I removed the tarp. The smell of cedar was barely noticeable beneath the mustiness. I opened the chest. There were quilts and photo albums. Groping inside, my hand touched leather. It was the old family Bible, the large one, with a cracked spine and almost erased gold lettering. Marty read the Bible every night, but she used a small edition she kept on her bedside table. This one she kept stored away. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I sat on a small stool and opened it across my knees. I flipped through the thin pages, Genesis, Exodus, Psalms, until I found it. Between the pages of the book of Job was an envelope. It was nothing special. Cheap paper, yellowed with age. It was sealed. And on the front, in handwriting I didn't recognize, was a single name, Marty. I broke the seal with my thumb. The paper tore harshly. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper. The ink was faded, almost brown, but legible. It wasn't written in cursive, but in large, aggressive capital letters. Mrs. Gresham, I saw what happened at the site. I was there late. I saw your son, Darnell. He was drunk. He was messing around in the backhoe cabin. He didn't know what he was doing. He hit the scaffolding support, knocked out the bolt, laughed, and ran away. I saw him. I saw how he crippled that man. If you don't want your son to rot in prison for attempted murder, and if you don't want your husband to lose his company and be ruined, you will pay $1,000 in cash every Thursday, forever. If you miss a payment, I go to the police, I go to the press, I destroy the Gresham name. Don't tell Thomas anything. If he knows, I will know too. There was no signature. I stared at the letter. The words blurred. Darnell, my son, had caused the accident. My son had paralyzed a man. I closed my eyes, trying to reconstruct 1984. Darnell was 22. He went out a lot. He drank. He came home late. I remembered the night of the accident. He came into the house pale, shaking. He said he had the flu. He stayed locked in his room for 3 days. I thought he was sick. Marty took care of him. She brought him soup. But she knew. A few days later, that letter must have arrived. She knew her son was responsible for wrecking a man's life and nearly sinking my company. And instead of telling me, instead of forcing him to face the consequences, she protected him. She made a deal with the blackmailer, $1,000 a week for 40 years. She paid the ransom to save me from ruin and Darnell from prison. She carried that burden alone. But something didn't quite add up. I'm an engineer. I speak the language of loads and stresses. I reread the letter. He hit the scaffolding support, knocked out the bolt. I frowned. I went to the workbench and opened the accident report. I pulled out the blueprints for the scaffolding we used in 1984. The locking mechanism was gravity-fed. The bolt was on the inner face of the upright, oriented toward the concrete pillar. If a machine hit the scaffolding from the outside, it would bend the structure, dent the legs. It wouldn't pop a bolt inward. To remove that bolt, you had to stand in front of it, lift the safety tab, and slide it out. A machine doesn't do that by accident. A drunken young man doesn't do that from a cabin. Someone had lied. The letter said, I saw him hit the scaffolding. But the physics said otherwise. Whoever wrote that knew Darnell was drunk and on the site but didn't know about a scaffolding. They used the coincidence to pin the blame on him. But who? Who knew Darnell was there and yet was ignorant of the technical details? Who hated us enough to bleed us for 40 years? I looked at the handwriting again. Those clumsy capital letters seemed familiar. I had seen them on material orders, on work notes. It was the handwriting of my foreman, Elijah Eli Sterling. He was the only one who had the keys to the site. He signed the safety reports. He had confirmed everything was in order when he left. If Darnell was there, Eli let him in or saw him. He no longer worked for me. He had retired years ago and, from what I heard, was fading away in an assisted living facility in another county. I didn't wait for dawn. I didn't sleep. I went upstairs, grabbed the letter, the notebook, and my keys. I drove 4 hours on back roads to the Maplewood Assisted Living Facility, a low brick building surrounded by a wire fence and neglected lawn. Inside, it smelled of chlorine, old life, and resignation. I signed in at reception. The nurse barely looked up from her phone as she pointed toward the back. I found him in a wheelchair next to a window overlooking a brick wall. The strong foreman, who used to shout orders over the noise of machines, had shrunk into a skeleton wrapped in a stained cardigan. His mouth was slightly open, his gaze lost. "Eli," I said, standing in front of him. He didn't move. I didn't know if he could hear me. "Eli, it's Thomas Gresham." His eyes flickered. He slowly turned his head. Memory took its time, cutting through the fog of pills and years. Then his eyes widened slightly. "Gresham." His voice rasped. "You look old." "We all do, Eli." I dragged a plastic chair over and sat facing him. There was no time to lose. I didn't know how much lucidity he had left. "I need to ask you about 84, the I-20, the collapse." He blinked. "That was a long time ago. Bad time." "Yes, it was bad," I said. "But it's not what you told my wife." I pulled the yellowed letter from my pocket and unfolded it in front of his face. His eyes locked onto those capital letters. I saw something. Fear, and behind it, a flicker of the old Eli. "I didn't write that," he muttered, looking away. "Don't lie to me, Eli," I responded harshly. "I know your handwriting. I've seen it for 20 years. You wrote this. You told Marty that Darnell caused the accident. You told her you saw him pull the bolt. You bled her for 1,000 a week for 40 years. He started shaking his head, gripping the armrests. "I don't know what you were talking about. I'm just an old man. Leave me alone." "You stole from us, Eli. You robbed my family. You watched me break my back to pay insurance premiums while you, according to this letter, were getting an envelope every Thursday." He fell silent, his jaw clenched. He was trying to play senile. I leaned in, catching the smell of stale coffee. "I have the bank records, Eli. I have the videos. And I have lawyers ready to tear this place apart to find where you hid the money. But right now, I don't care about the money. I want the truth. Why did you do it? Why did you do that to Marty?" He started to laugh, a wet, ugly sound. "You think I got rich, Gresham? Look at me. Look at this place. Do I look like a millionaire?" "Then where is it?" I asked. "Where's the money?" He lifted his head. Suddenly, his eyes were clear, sharp. He scanned me as if evaluating a load. "They didn't give it to me, Thomas," he said. "They gave me $500 once to write the letter." I froze. "What?" "I was the foreman," he continued. "I had the keys to the site, but I didn't come up with the idea. I just wrote what they told me. Who? I asked, my throat dry. He smiled crookedly. The boy? Thomas? You're Darnell. Darnell. The world tilted. He came to my shack the night of the accident, Eli said. He was a wreck. Crying, shaking. He owed money, Thomas. A lot of it. From gambling, racing. He'd borrowed from bad people in Atlanta, and they were going to beat him up. He needed a way out. He knew about the accident. He knew you were distracted. He came and begged me. He told me you would never give him that money because you were too strict. He said his mother was soft, that she would pay anything to protect him. He dictated the letter to me, word for word. He gave me $500 to mail it, said he'd handle the rest. I swallowed the emptiness. And he collected every week. Eli nodded. He told her to drop the money off at the bank so it would look like she was running errands. He collected it, playing both messenger and victim. He used me as the boogeyman, Thomas. He would tell her, Kowalski wants more. Kowalski threatens to talk. But it was him. It was always him. I looked at him. I wanted to call the old man a liar. I wanted to grab his cardigan. But the pieces fit too well. The watch, the greed, the rush to get into the office. Darnell hadn't just robbed his mother. He had psychologically tortured her. He made her believe her son was a criminal. He forced her to pay for that guilt for 40 years. He used her love as a weapon and let her die believing the lie. Eli watched me, almost relieved to let it out. It's bad blood, Thomas, he said. I took the $500 because I needed it. I never asked for another penny. I thought he'd stop collecting once he paid off the debts, but he never stopped, did he? No, I replied, getting to my feet. My legs felt heavy. No, he never stopped. I turned away. I couldn't look at him anymore. Yes, Eli was guilty, but he wasn't the architect. The architect of 40 years of silent suffering was my own son. Give the boy my regards, Eli shouted as I walked out. Tell him I still remember. I didn't answer. I crossed the door into the brutal daylight. I felt sick. I walked to the side of the building and vomited on the grass. My wife, my sweet Marty, had spent her life protecting a son who was holding a knife to her throat. She had woken up every day in fear. She had looked at Darnell with a mixture of love and terror, wondering if the witness would ever speak, never suspecting that the witness was eating at our table, wearing the clothes she washed, eating the food she cooked. I wiped my mouth and stood up straight. The nausea transformed into something cold, defined. Darnell wanted the money. He wanted the house. He wanted everything. He would receive something, yes, but not what he imagined. I returned to the truck. When I turned on my phone, I saw a message from him. Dad, still haven't found those papers. We need to resolve this. I typed with strangely steady fingers. Come tonight. Bring your attorney. I found the papers. We need to sign everything. Send. Start the engine. It was time to prepare the Last Supper of the Gresham family. As I pulled onto my street, I saw a gray car parked in front of my driveway. It wasn't Darnell's. It was an anonymous Ford. A man was inside reading the newspaper. When he saw me, he folded the paper and got out. He wore a cheap, ill-fitting suit. I recognized him instantly. 40 years in construction teaches you how to spot a process server. Mr. Thomas Gresham? He asked, walking up the path. That's me. He handed me a thick manila envelope. You've been served, sir. Have a good afternoon. He walked away without looking back. I opened the envelope right there.
I didn't need to go inside to know that Darnell had made his move. He knew I had gone to the bank. He knew I hadn't bought the gambling story. He knew I was investigating. A cornered animal bites. The heading hit me. Petition for emergency guardianship and conservatorship. Plaintiff, Darnell Gresham. Defendant, Thomas Gresham. I read the summary. My own son was petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent. He claimed that my wife's death had caused a psychotic break, that I was suffering from paranoid delusions and severe dementia, that I was squandering the family estate on absurd investigations, and that I was a danger to myself and my finances. He requested immediate control of my assets, accounts, investments, and properties. He wanted to be my legal guardian. If he won, he would have the power to stop me, fire lawyers, bury evidence, lock me in a nursing home, and medicate me until I truly lost my mind and access to the $5 million I had saved. I went into the dark house and sat down at the kitchen table to read his affidavit. It was a masterpiece of lies, seasoned with truths. My father has become erratic since my mother's death, it said. He believes there are conspiracies surrounding her passing. He went to the bank and shouted at the tellers because he couldn't remember his own details. Yesterday he disappeared for 6 hours. He drove to a nursing home to harass a senile man. He believes this man holds secrets about an accident from 40 years ago. He is living in the past. He is spending thousands of dollars on detectives to chase ghosts. I fear he will lose everything. It was intelligent, wicked, but intelligent. He was using my search for the truth as proof of my insanity. The hearing was set for the following morning, an emergency session. I had less than 12 hours. I didn't sleep. I showered, shaved, and put on my best gray suit. I shined my shoes until I could see my reflection. I wasn't going to walk into that courtroom looking like the confused old man Darnell needed me to be. The county courthouse was familiar to me. I had poured the foundations for the extension myself in the 90s. I walked up the stairs with my head held high, though my stomach was churning. The courtroom was small. This wasn't criminal court. It was family court. Intimate, quiet, lethal. Darnell was already there at the plaintiff's table with a lawyer I didn't know, a guy with slicked back hair, and a very expensive suit. When he saw me enter, Darnell wasn't smiling. He wore a look of sincere concern, the face of a loving son forced to do something terrible for his father's own good. I sat alone at the defendant's table. I hadn't had time to call my lawyer. I was on my own. The judge, Judge Peterson, entered. A young man, maybe 40. He didn't know me. He only saw an old man alone against a worried son. Darnell testified first. His performance deserved an award. Your Honor, he said, his voice trembling just enough. I adore my father. He's always been my hero. But since Mom died, he's just gone. He sees things. He believes Mom was a gambler. He believes she was blackmailed. He went to the bank and screamed at the tellers because he couldn't remember his own information. Yesterday, he disappeared for 6 hours. He drove to a nursing home to harass a senile man. He believes that man holds secrets from a 40-year-old accident. He lives in the past. He's spending money on investigators. I just want him to be safe. I want to protect what he built. The judge nodded compassionately. He looked at me with that pity I hate so much. Mr. Gresham, he said, you've heard your son's allegations. He says you show signs of paranoia and financial irresponsibility. Is it true that you hired a private investigator this week? I got up, my knees protesting.
Yes, Your Honor, I replied. I hired a professional to review discrepancies in my wife's financial records. And is it true that you went to a nursing home yesterday? Yes, I said. I went to interview a former employee about those discrepancies. The judge frowned. Mr. Gresham, he added more gently, your wife died 10 days ago. Grief clouds the mind. It makes us see patterns where there are none. Your son fears you are chasing ghosts and spending your savings on it. I looked at Darnell. He was covering his mouth with his hand, hiding a smile. If I started talking about anonymous letters, a Rolex, and confessions without organized evidence, I would sound like a conspiracy theorist. I needed time. Time to get into his house, find the stolen money, and irrefutable proof. Your Honor, I said, I understand how it looks. I admit my conduct has been unorthodox. Losing Marty has been hard. Darnell nodded forcefully, encouraging the judge to see my admission as weakness. But I am not incompetent. I am not senile. I built half the bridges in this county. I can square a balance sheet better than anyone here. I am not asking you to dismiss the petition outright. I am asking for due process. I am asking for an adjournment. For what purpose? The judge asked. Give me 3 days, I said. 72 hours. Subject me to an independent psychological evaluation by a court-appointed expert of your choice. I will provide my bank statements to demonstrate that my spending is reasonable. I have $5 million saved, Your Honor. Spending a few hundred on a detective is not ruining me. Darnell's lawyer leaned into him. Gaining time was not in their interest. Your Honor, he interjected, we believe there is an immediate risk to the estate. 3 days could mean thousands of dollars less. The judge looked back at me. My hands were steady, my eyes clear. I'm going to grant the adjournment, he said. We cannot take away a man's rights without hearing from a doctor. The hearing will be Friday at 9 a.m. Darnell looked like he'd bitten into a lemon. However, the judge added, to protect the estate, I order a temporary freeze on the principal assets. Until Friday, you may not withdraw more than $100 from any account, Mr. Gresham. Your credit cards will be suspended. We maintain the status quo. I nodded. It was a trap, but a trap I could work with. I didn't need money for what was coming. I needed my hands. Understood, Your Honor. On the way out, Darnell approached me in the hallway. He leaned in, erasing the worried son gesture, replacing it with a venomous whisper. You're just delaying the inevitable, old man, he spat. I'm going to win. And when I win, I'm sending you to the cheapest facility I can find. I'll lock you in a room without windows and let you rot, just like you let Mom rot. I looked at him. I didn't blink. You have 3 days, Darnell, I said. Enjoy them, because when Friday comes, you won't be worried about my estate. You'll be worried about your freedom. I walked out into the sunlight. I had 72 hours, frozen accounts, and $100 in my pocket. But I had something Darnell didn't. The keys to the house I had built for him 10 years ago. And I knew exactly where he would hide his secrets, because I knew he was too lazy to be original. That night, I parked a few blocks away from his house. It was one of those catalog mansions with too many columns and too much stucco. Soulless. It screamed money, but I knew whose money it was. At 6 o'clock, a black SUV, a Cadillac Escalade, drove Darnell and his wife, Lisa, away. I watched them get in, laughing with champagne glasses in hand. They were celebrating. They thought the freeze was the beginning of the end. For the old man. They would go to an expensive restaurant to toast their future fortune. I waited until the taillights disappeared. Then another 20 minutes, just in case. The neighborhood was one of those where the neighbors don't greet each other, and the hedges are as tall as the mortgages. I reached under the seat and pulled out my tool belt. I didn't need lockpicks or crowbars. I'm a builder. I know how a house is put together. and how it's taken apart. Specifically, I knew how this one was put together because I was the contractor. I know every nail, every screw. I walked around to the side gate. It was padlocked, but the latch had been loose for 3 years. I told Darnell about it. He never fixed it. I strolled to the backyard. The pool lights were on, making the turquoise water glow. It looked like a magazine catalog. I stood before the back door, solid wood with a 3-point lock, impenetrable for a thief with a pry bar. But I wasn't a thief. I was the installer. When I put that door in, I used heavy brass hinges with decorative finishes on the outside because Darnell wanted it to open outward. I told him it was a risk. He said I was old-fashioned. I took out a flathead screwdriver and a hammer. I placed the screwdriver under the head of the top pin and gave it a sharp tap. The pin went up. I pulled it out. I repeated the process with the middle and bottom pins. I left the 3 rods on the doormat. Then I carefully pried the door open on the lock side and lifted the door panel off the hinges. I held it before it could scrape the stucco and leaned it against the wall. I was inside. No broken glass, no alarm. The sensors were on the frame, not the door panel. The house smelled of expensive cologne and cleaning products. I wiped my boots on the rug. I didn't want to leave footprints yet. I knew exactly where to go. His office upstairs, the room with the best view, the one he said he needed for his investments. I went up the stairs. The carpet was so thick, it swallowed my footsteps. The office door was open, opulent. I went in and turned on the desk lamp. It was obscene. Leather panels on the walls. A desk fit for a CEO. Shelves crammed with books with unbroken spines. I went straight to the hunting painting hanging behind the chair. It was hideous. I moved it aside. There it was. The built-in safe, electronic keypad, 4 digits, the only mystery. I looked at the keypad. Darnell is a narcissist and lazy. He wouldn't use something random. I tried his birthday. Nothing. Lisa's. Nothing. Their wedding anniversary. Nothing. I looked around. All of this, the leather, the desk, the view, existed because of one person, Marty. It was logical that Darnell would want to remind himself of that every time he opened the safe. I typed in my wife's date of birth, 04, 07. The light turned green. A mechanical click. I felt sick. He had used the birthday of the woman he was robbing to protect what he had stolen from her, a private joke. I pulled open the heavy door. Inside, the shelves were packed. At the back were bundles of cash, thick packages of $100 bills with bands from the First Colonial Bank. It was the cash Marty had been withdrawing for the last few months. He hadn't even bothered to launder it. He just piled it there like loose change. On the middle shelf were passports and bank passbooks. I opened them. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, in Switzerland. Obscene balances, regular deposits for decades that matched the withdrawals in Marty's notebook. He had invested the stolen money. He had made it grow. While his mother clipped coupons, he capitalized on her suffering. On the tapisserie, a pile of papers held together with a rubber band. The Duran was a yellowed sheet of notebook paper. In pencil, someone had practiced writing capital letters over and over. I saw what Darnell did. I saw him. I saw him. The handwriting was shaky at first, then aggressive, exactly like the letter. Behind it was the first draft of the missive with crossed-out phrases, rewritten lines, searching for the most threatening tone possible. If you don't pay, your son goes to prison. He had repeated that sentence 3 times. Behind those were dozens more letters, drafts of threats, he had sent Marty when he needed more. Kowalski is asking for more, Mom. The witness is getting nervous. I need 5,000 more, or he'll talk. He kept them. He kept the evidence of his own villainy. Why? Because they were trophies. Proof of how smart he thought he was, of how easily he had manipulated the woman who gave birth to him. My hand trembled as I held the papers. This wasn't just financial abuse. It was planned psychological torture over 40 years. It was proof that my son had no soul. I took everything out. I put the cash, the passbooks, and the letters into a canvas bag I had brought. I emptied the safe. I left nothing. I closed it and spun the dial. I rehung the painting. For a moment, I wanted to smash everything, destroy the desk, throw the books, but that would alert him. I needed him to feel safe for just a little longer. I walked back downstairs with the bag on my shoulder. I rehung the door, fitted the hinges, and tapped the pins back into place with 3 light taps. Everything looked normal. I went back out through the loose side gate and walked back to the truck. I put the bag on the passenger seat next to the notebook. I took a deep breath. Yes, I had committed a crime, but I didn't feel like a thief. I felt like a soldier recovering ammunition behind enemy lines. It was midnight. Darnell would be ordering dessert, laughing at how easy it was to manipulate his old man. I started the engine. Let him laugh. Let him enjoy his creme brulee. The next day, he would receive a call that would mark the beginning of the end. By Saturday morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with the bag open, the bundles of cash, the foreign account documents, the letters, spread out like pieces of a puzzle, finally solved. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. I felt that vibrant energy you get before pouring a large slab of concrete, when you know that once the mix starts flowing, there's no turning back. I needed a witness. I couldn't do this alone, because Darnell is a liar and would twist everything. I needed someone who had loved Marty as much as I did, who would see the rot before I burned the house down. I called Lorraine. It was 6 o'clock. She answered, scared, thinking something had happened to me. I want you to come over, honey, I said firmly. Now? Alone. Don't tell your brother anything. You fell? Are you all right? I'm fine. Just come. It's about Mom and the money. She arrived 20 minutes later, disheveled and in sweatpants. When she walked in and saw the money and the papers on the oak table, she froze. Dad, she whispered, what is this? Did you rob a bank? No, I replied calmly. Your brother did. Sit down. I poured her coffee and showed her everything. The blue notebook, the photo of Darnell's watch in the rain. And worst of all, I put the letters in front of her. I made her read the draft where Darnell practiced threatening his own mother. I watched as recognition turned into horror, and then into tears. He terrorized her, Lorraine cried. 40 years, Dad. He made her believe she was going to prison. He stole her peace. He stole her life. And our future, I said. This money is your mother's pension, your grandparents' inheritance, every gift you never received because she was saving it. It's all here. Lorraine looked at me, her eyes burning with rage and pain. I want y'all to kill him, she said. I didn't reply. We're not going to kill him. We're going to destroy him legally, publicly, and forever. But I need your help. You're going to be here today. You're going to be my backup. We agreed on the plan. Lorraine would hide in the large pantry next to the kitchen, behind a slatted door that would allow her to see and hear everything. I went to the garage and brought a can of bear spray I kept for aggressive dogs. I handed it to her. If he tries to touch me, I said, if he gets violent, when the truth comes out, you come out. Aim for the eyes. I will, she said, gripping the can. I believed her. Once she was hidden in the pantry, I set the scene. I closed the blinds and turned off all the lights except for the dining room chandelier. I wanted an oppressive, small atmosphere, like a confessional. Then I made the call. It was the most important performance of my life. I hunched my shoulders. I let my voice tremble. I poured all some of the weariness and grief of those months into it. I dialed. Hello? Darnell answered on the first ring. He sounded cheerful. Darnell, son. I let a sob into my voice. I can't do this anymore. I didn't sleep last night. The hearing, the lawyers, the fighting. It's too much. I'm an old man, son. I'm tired. Silence. I could almost hear him smiling. I told you, Dad, he replied sweetly. You're not well? This stress is bad for your heart. You have to let go. You're right. I said, you're right about everything. I'm confused. I'm chasing ghosts. I just want it to stop. I want to rest. That's all we want for you, Dad. To rest. To be safe. I want to sign the papers, I murmured. The guardianship, the conservatorship, whatever you bring. Bring it, and I'll sign everything. Just promise me you won't put me in a nursing home. Let me stay in the house. There was a small gasp of joy that he tried to stifle. Of course, Dad, he assured me. We never wanted to send you to a home, just to help with the accounts. I'll come tonight. I'll bring Mr. Harrison, so everything is legal. Tonight at Walmart, don't be late. If I think about it too much, I might change my mind. We'll be there, he promised. Rest easy. It's almost over. I hung up. My hand wasn't shaking. It's almost over, I repeated softly. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I put the money and documents back into the bag and placed it under the table, hidden by the long tablecloth. I placed a single, heavy fountain pen in the center of the table. No paper, just the pen. I sat at the head of the wobble in my warm chair and waited. The hours stretched. At 6, Lorraine returned and slipped into the pantry without a word. At 6:58, headlights illuminated the window. I heard doors opening. Laughter. They were celebrating. They were coming to strip an old man of his dignity and his assets. And they were laughing. The doorbell rang. It's open, I called out, my voice raspy. Darnell came in first, in a flawless blue suit, his hair slicked back like an executive in an ad. Behind him was Mr. Harrison, carrying a briefcase, looking like he was only there for the fee. In Darnell's hand, unbelievably, was a bottle of champagne. Dom Perignon. Dad? He boomed, walking into the dimly lit dining room. Why are you in the dark? Saving on the electric bill? He laughed at his own joke. He put the bottle on the sideboard. We'll have this later, to celebrate. Attorney, please sit. The lawyer placed a thick stack of papers on the table, sliding them towards me. The dry sound they made on the wood was the only sound. The air was heavy, like before a storm. I looked at the documents. The first page read, Voluntary Agreement for Conservatorship. An elegant way of saying I was handing over my life, my freedom, and my dignity to the man across from me. Just sign here, Dad, Darnell said, his voice silky but with a thread of anxiety. Just sign here, and I'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about a thing. We'll pay the bills, take care of the house, manage the accounts. You just have to trust me. I looked at him. He was smiling, showing too much teeth. To him, I wasn't his father, the man who taught him to tie his shoes, to throw a ball. I was an obstacle with an expiration date. I picked up the pen.
It felt cold and heavy in my hand. I held it over the signature line. My hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from containing the rage. Darnell leaned forward, mesmerized by the tip of the pen. The lawyer looked at his watch, thinking about dinner. I lowered the pen until the tip touched the paper and left a small dot of ink. I stopped. I looked up. "You know, son," I said, my voice soft, "I spent 40 years pouring foundations, and I learned that when you build on a lie, sooner or later, the whole house comes down." Darnell frowned. "What are you talking about, Dad? Sign it, now." I moved my hand, but instead of signing, I brought my fingers to the lower edge of the table, where I had taped a small recorder hours earlier. I peeled it off and placed it on top of the papers. "What is that?" Darnell asked, losing his smile. I pressed play. The room filled with static, and then a raspy voice, like gravel, spoke. Eli Sterling's voice. "He came to my shack the night of the accident," it said. "He was crying, shaking. Told me he owed money to bad people from gambling. He asked for help. He dictated the letter to me, told me to write that I saw him pull the bolt. He said his mother would pay anything." Darnell went pale. He stared at the recorder as if it were a bomb. "She was soft," the voice continued. "Said she'd pay to save him. He collected every week. He used me as the monster. But it was him. It was always him. I let it play for a few more seconds, just long enough for the venom to sink in. Then I turned it off." The silence was louder than the recording. Darnell opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked at the lawyer. Mr. Harrison stared at him, horrified, slowly closing his briefcase. He knew he was sitting next to a criminal. I stood up. I didn't need to lean on the table. I stood tall. I felt like the man who carried beams on his shoulder again. I fixed my eyes on his. "You didn't just steal the money, Darnell," I said firmly. "You stole her life. 40 years of waking up, thinking her son was going to prison. 40 years of going to bed praying the blackmailer wouldn't talk." He tried to deny it. "Dad, that old man is lying. He's crazy. Don't you dare." I slammed my fist on the table. The champagne bottle clinked. "Don't you dare lie to me again. I have the bank records, the photos of you in the parking lot, and the letters you wrote in your own hand." I pulled the canvas bag from under the table and dumped it out. The cash, the foreign account passbooks, and the draft letters fell onto the conservatorship documents, burying them. "She died believing you were a victim," I continued, tears burning my eyes. "She died thinking she was protecting you. She used her last strength to crawl to that bank for you. She thought you were a sinner who needed redemption. She was wrong. You are not a sinner, Darnell. You are a demon. You are a parasite who fed on the woman who gave you life." Darnell looked at the pile of evidence. He understood the game was over. His shock twisted into something ugly, pure desperation. His eyes darted to the handwritten letters. He lunged across the table. Everything was fast. Plates slid. The champagne bottle rolled and smashed on the floor. He wasn't coming for me. He was coming for the papers. He wanted to destroy them. "Give me those," he shrieked. "They're mine." He grabbed a handful of sheets, tearing some. He moved like a cornered animal. But he didn't get far. The pantry door burst open. Lorraine stepped out. She had heard everything, her face wet with tears, but her gaze was hard. She held the bear spray with both hands, aiming it at his face. "Get away from him!" she screamed. "Get away from Dad!" Darnell froze, the paper half ripped in his hand. He saw her. You were in there?" he stammered. "I heard everything, Darnell.
she said, advancing. Every word? I know what you did to Mom. He looked around wildly. He was surrounded. The lawyer had backed up to the door, a hand on the knob, ready to flee. You're sick, Lorraine spat. And you're going to pay. Darnell let the papers drop. He slumped into the chair. The air went out of him. He looked small, pathetic. I sat down again. I placed the blue notebook on top of the cash. It's over, son, I said. The bank is closed, and the police are on their way. The silence once again took hold of the house, interrupted only by Darnell's ragged breathing. Lorraine still held the spray in position, guarding the pile of evidence. Mr. Harrison, pressed against the door, didn't know whether to stay or run. I looked towards the hall. You can come out now, I said loudly. The master bedroom door opened. It wasn't a ghost who walked out, but Sheriff Jones, followed by my attorney, Mr. Davies. They had been sitting there for an hour, in the dark, listening to everything through the microphone I had hidden. Darnell lifted his head. When he saw the sheriff's badge, his eyes bulged. He understood this wasn't going to be fixed with a family talk. It was the end of the line. The sheriff walked in under the chandelier light. He was a big man I'd known for 20 years. He looked at Darnell like he was something he'd found under the sole of his boot. Darnell Gresham, he said, his hand on his belt. You have the right to remain silent. Darnell backed up, dragging his chair. No, wait, Sheriff. It's a misunderstanding. It's a family matter. My dad is confused. Doesn't sound like a misunderstanding, Jones replied, pulling out his handcuffs. Sounds like a confession. Blackmail, extortion, and threats. Mr. Davies stepped forward with a folder in his hand. He looked at Darnell's lawyer, who was trying to disappear. It's worse, Davies added professionally. We have records of the Cayman accounts. The deposits match Mrs. Martha's withdrawals. That's money laundering and tax evasion. The IRS has already been notified. They are very interested in how an employee making $60,000 a year has millions offshore. Darnell looked at his own lawyer. Do something, he pleaded. Stop this. I'm sorry, Harrison said, taking off his glasses. I cannot be a part of this. You lied to me. You said it was a simple guardianship case. I withdraw. He opened the door and left, leaving Darnell alone. Darnell looked at me, his face ruined. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was a scared child with his hand in the cookie jar. Dad, please, he cried. Tell them to stop. I'm your son. You can't let them take me. Think about the family. Think about the kids. I looked at him. I thought about the family. About Marty, kneeling in the rain on the asphalt. About 40 years of fear. You stopped being my son the day you wrote that letter, I replied. The sheriff turned him around and put the handcuffs on him. The metallic click sounded final. They walked him toward the door. Lorraine followed him with her eyes, crying, but not backing down. She was strong, like her mother. Wait, I said. The sheriff stopped. I went to the wound board and took out my checkbook. I opened it, took the pen, and wrote a check. I tore it out and walked up to Darnell. His eyes lit up with hope. Maybe he thought it was to pay bail. I slipped it into the pocket of his suit jacket next to the silk handkerchief he had used to fake tears at the funeral. What is this? He whispered. $1,450, and I answered. It's the balance of your mother's account when she died. everything else you took. And that is exactly what you are worth to me now. Use it to buy cigarettes in prison." Darnell looked at me and began to scream, not from fear, but from rage. "You old son of a bitch!" he bellowed as they put him in the car. "That money was mine. I deserved it. I waited for you to die, and you never did." They closed the patrol car door, muffling the screams. I walked out onto the porch. The blue lights stained the trees. Behind the patrol car, the black SUV waited. The door opened, and Lisa got out, dressed in cocktail attire, with a handbag in her hand. She saw her husband in handcuffs, the sheriff, and me. "What's going on?" she shrieked. "He stole everything, Lisa," I shouted. "The house, the cars, the trips. He took it all from his mother. And now, the government is coming to collect it." Lisa stopped. She looked at Darnell in horror. She didn't run to him. She backed away. She knew what it meant. The money train was over. The life she knew was finished. She looked at him, not with love, but with pure panic for her own future. They put him in the car. Lisa returned to the SUV. She didn't even deign to look at me. The cars drove away, leaving silence and smoke. The crickets resumed their chirping. The leaves rustled. Lorraine came out onto the porch and stood by my side. She took my hand. "It's over, Dad," she whispered. I took a deep breath. The air felt clean. For the first time in 6 months, the weight on my chest was gone. "Yes, honey," I replied, squeezing her hand. "It's over." We went back inside. The money was still on the table. The letters, too. But they no longer held power over us. They were just paper. I picked up the blue notebook. Tomorrow, I would burn it. Tomorrow, I would start selling the house and moving on. But tonight, I was going to sleep. Sleep like a righteous man. I looked at Lorraine. "You hungry?" I asked. "There's still some fried chicken left." She smiled through her tears. "Yes, Dad, I'm starving." We sat down and ate in the dim light. The house felt different. It was no longer haunted. It was empty, yes, but it was a clean emptiness. A space ready to be filled with something else. I had lost a son, but I had saved my dignity. And somewhere, I hoped Marty was watching, seeing that she no longer had to protect me, understanding that the debt had been paid, not with money, but with justice. 3 days were enough to dismantle a life that took 40 years to build. The house sold in a week. Seems like good foundations and oak floors are still worth something, even if the memories are stained. Yesterday, I walked through the empty house one last time. The echo of my boots didn't sound sad, it sounded clean. I didn't feel ghosts pulling at my ankles. I just saw walls that needed paint, and a ceiling that would keep the young couple who bought it safe. I left the keys on the countertop next to a bottle of wine. I hope they fill that place with better memories. I hope they raise children who know the value of truth. I met Lorraine at the entrance. She looked different, too, lighter. The shadow of her brother had disappeared. Darnell was still in the county jail without bail, considered a flight risk because of his offshore accounts. His wife had filed for divorce and taken the children to her mother's in Florida. His empire of lies collapsed, just like I told him it would. I gave Lorraine a thick envelope. Inside were the documents for a trust fund. I took half of the recovered money and put it in her and her children's names. Their college education was paid for. Their first homes, too. Lorraine cried when she saw the numbers. She tried to give it back, saying she didn't want anything tainted. "It's not tainted," I told her. "It's your mother's legacy. It's the only good thing to come out of all this. Use it to give those children the life she dreamed of. It's teaching them that you don't have to lie or steal to be happy. She hugged me tightly. She asked where I was going to sleep, if I wanted to stay at her house. I told her no, that I had other plans, that I had a promise to keep. I drove to Oak Hill Memorial Gardens. It was a beautiful day. The blue sky hurt my eyes. The mud from the funeral had vanished. The grass was green, dotted with wildflowers. Peace hung in the air. Walking to Marty's grave took less time than I expected. The headstone was already in place. Martha Gresham, beloved wife and mother. I stood there, listening to the wind in the trees. I thought about the bright-eyed girl who had promised to love me through richness and poverty. She kept her promise. She loved me so much she sacrificed her peace. She loved me so much she fed a parasite so I wouldn't lose my company. I took the blue notebook from my pocket. The spine was broken. The spine was folded. It weighed more than it should, as if holding a block of lead. I knelt on the grass, pulled out my Zippo lighter. The metal was cold. You were reckless, Marty, I whispered to the stone. Incredibly reckless. You thought you were protecting me, but you were feeding a monster inside the house. You should have told me. We would have faced it together. I would have torn the world down for you. I spun the wheel. The flame danced in the wind. But I love you, I said, my voice breaking. I love you more than I can say, and I forgive you. I forgive you the secrets. I forgive you the lies. You did what you thought you had to do. You were a mother protecting her young, even if the young was a wolf. I brought the fire to the corner of the notebook. The cardboard caught quickly. The blue turned black. The dates curled. I watched 1984, 1990, 2010 disappear. The figures of 1,000 by 1,000, the records of 4 decades of extortion, turned into gray ash that the wind carried away. I cleaned up the mess, Marty, I said, as the last remnant disintegrated. I took out the trash. Darnell can't hurt us anymore. He can't hurt anyone. You can rest. Don't worry about the police or the neighbors. It's done. I brushed the dirt off my knees. I felt light, as if gravity had loosened its grip. Rest in peace, my love, I whispered. I'll see you later. I turned without looking back. Only a stone and a memory remained there. The rest of my life was waiting for me in the parking lot. Next to my old truck was a beautiful monster. A 40-foot diesel pusher RV, white, gleaming, with chrome accents. King-size bed, full kitchen, an immense windshield wrapping the front like a pair of sunglasses. We had talked about getting an RV 30 years ago. We were going to see the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, put our feet in the Pacific. There was always something stopping us: bills, construction work, Darnell's dramas. There were no impediments left now. I transferred my travel bag from the truck to the RV. I put my toolbox in the side compartment. I placed a framed photo of Marty on the dashboard next to the GPS. I climbed into the driver's seat. It was high, cushioned. I turned the key. The engine started with a deep roar that vibrated everything. It sounded like freedom. I checked the mirrors, the gauges, full tank, full water, the fridge stocked with decent food. I was 80 years old. I didn't have a house. I didn't have a wife. I had a daughter I was leaving behind, and another I never wanted to see again. I had $5 million in the bank, and an entire country ahead of me. I released the brake. The vehicle moved forward, eager. I drove out of the cemetery and onto the highway. The asphalt stretched out like a gray ribbon toward the horizon. I looked in the rearview mirror. I no longer saw the old house with its dark corners, or the bank with its back door, or the son who betrayed me, only the asphalt getting farther away. I pressed the accelerator. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't building for others, or covering up mistakes, or worrying about payrolls, insurance, or blackmail. I was just driving. I looked at the photo on the dashboard. Marty was smiling. "We're going to the ocean, Marty," I said, just like we promised. I looked at the road, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The most valuable lesson I learned at 80 years old isn't how to make money, but the cost of cover-ups. My wife has spent 4 decades protecting our son from the consequences, but in reality, she fed a monster inside our home. Love without reason saves no one. It only prolongs the tragedy. The truth, however painful, is always better than a comforting lie. Don't let the word family force you to accept abuse. Sometimes the bravest act of love is letting those you care about face the law and their own conscience. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.